You're listening to Money Talks. My name is Michael Campbell. Money Talks is brought to you by Solera Club. Solera Club is a royalty-based investment. In investment terms, that means you get paid first. You're front of the line. There are no fees attached with it, and it's in the tech sector. A quick warning. Something serious is happening in the aftermath of the U.S. election, so I'm forced to talk politics for a moment. God knows I don't want to rehash the U.S. presidential election. As I repeatedly said, neither candidate met my personal standards of integrity or character to win my support. You're welcome to have your favorite. Heck, you're welcome to sleep with a blow-up doll of your favorite. I couldn't care less. I really mean that. I couldn't care less, so please don't send me an email telling me why your choice is the right one. But I can't ignore the bigger story. The campaign to delegitimize the election of Donald Trump. And that campaign is further eroding confidence in government. And that's the part I'm interested in. Ironically, throughout the campaign, especially in October, all the media talk was about Mr. Trump refusing to recognize the election results and the predicted violence of Trump supporters when Hillary was going to be elected. Of course, that didn't happen, and all that changed. The Love Trump's hate gang violently protested. Hillary refused to accept the results, first with her refusal to concede on election night, but later having her campaign join the recount demands led by Jill Stein. I don't think I'm going to be out in a limb saying that the media's reaction would be very different if it were Trump supporters protesting, breaking store windows, beating up Clinton supporters. And keep in mind, it were Democratic Party operatives caught on tape inciting violence at Trump rallies. But that was just phase one. Much more important things are happening now. I'm talking about something profound, and it doesn't matter which candidate you like. It's one thing to strongly oppose and dislike a candidate. That's a short-term problem. When that person loses or leaves office, that problem goes with them. But it's quite another to talk about the corruption of the system. And about half of America already thought the system was corrupt. A huge percentage of the opposition to Hillary Clinton came from people who believed the system was rigged in her favor, that there was a two-tiered justice system operating, that political interference had been prominent in the IRS, the FBI, and the Justice Department. And that's very dangerous, by the way, because the removal of Mrs. Clinton doesn't end the problem. Only getting rid of the system does. That's what we witnessed in the Brexit vote. The Leave side wasn't angry or disgusted with one individual in Europe. No, they wanted to get rid of the system, so they voted to leave. Now, look what's happening today. The Democrats' opposition to Donald Trump has morphed into an attack on the system. First off, they complained that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, and therefore members of the Electoral College should ignore the system and their obligation based on hundreds of years of precedent. Next up, in the arsenal to delegitimize Mr. Trump's election was to blame fake news for Hillary's loss. Of course, there's no explanation why fake news didn't impact people in New York or Los Angeles or Latino voters. An added irony is how the mainstream media continues to advance the Democratic Party's establishment regarding fake news. They're completely oblivious to the degree they engage in it, where innuendo and speculation masquerade as fact. That's not the exception. When it comes to political commentary, it's the norm. The last couple of weeks have brought the latest attempt to delegitimize Mr. Trump's election, the Russian hacking story. So far, the mainstream media, starting with the Washington Post and New York Times, have not presented a single piece of concrete evidence. All that's been presented, all we have are, in quotes, anonymous sources from the CIA. I'm going to revisit that later in the show, but for now, the part I find astounding is that even if we took these unsubstantiated allegations about Russia as fact, think what they're saying. They're saying in an effort to elect Donald Trump, the Russians released hacked emails through WikiLeaks that detailed the collusion of some members of the press with the Clinton campaign. Others revealed that the Democratic National Committee undermined Bernie Sanders' bid for the nomination. WikiLeaks emails also revealed that Hillary Clinton knowingly sent classified information from her private server, and as well as the damning revelations regarding money from some of the most heinous regimes in the world going into the Clinton Foundation in return for access to then Secretary of State Clinton. But we're supposed to focus on the unsubstantiated allegations that Russia hacked the Democrats in an effort to elect Donald Trump, not the fact that those allegations, or rather, not the fact of what was in the emails. I mean, it's incredible to note that none of the dirty tricks, dishonesty, unethical behavior have been disputed. And keep in mind, if there were no unethical, maybe even criminal behavior, there's not a story. there would be nothing of significance in the leaked emails. But yes, for the morally bankrupt establishment, Russia is the story. Here's the point. Half the population had already lost confidence in the system. Now, thanks to the concerted effort to delegitimize the results through, that whole litany of things I just described, the other half is now also railing against the system. That spells big trouble for the U.S. This isn't going away. On Monday, the Electoral College votes. Democrats have been trying to convince Electoral College voters to refuse to support Trump, thereby denying him the presidency. Well, that's a small probability. Can you imagine the consequences? There would be massive escalation of civil violence, possibly even the murder of some prominent politicians, and civil war would be just one step closer. As I said, a small probability, but the effort to delegitimize Trump's victory will erode further confidence, or erode the confidence in the system and further. And that will come at a price. Money Talks is brought to you by Solera Club. Solera Club information can be found at soleraclub.com. I'm taking a break. We got a big story this week. Federal Reserve, I'll talk to Michael Levy about that, plus a couple of other things. I got a big fat idea, and it's related to that Federal Reserve interest rate hike. You better check your investment portfolio. Neil McIver is going to help you with that. We're also going to be talking some technology. Oh, the list is a long one. I am glad you're with us right here on the Money Talks Network. Michael Levy joins me on the line now. Mike, I just alluded to the fact, of course, that the Federal Reserve raised interest rates, much anticipated. We've been talking about the 100% probability of that, according to the markets. But, of course, what they said next is what has got the markets focused.
Mike, very surprising, and not surprising, but surprised so many people, so many market followers, so many investors, is the indication that not only did they raise rates, and that was expected, as you said, but the fact is they now have a further plan to raise rates more than what was expected. And remember, it's sort of we don't care about the news on the day of the news. What we want to do is play the anticipation, and that's how most people look at these kind of markets, is they anticipate what's going to happen and put on their positions. And what happened here is that the Fed surprised and said not only are they raising rates, but they could raise rates more rapidly or more rate raises next year, 2017, that was first anticipated, and that's what sent the market off. That's what sent the U.S. dollar higher and everything that went with that.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. This time last year, they also raised rates in December, and they also promised, 4 rate increases in 2016? This is December 15, remember, 2016. And, of course, we kept on coming to all those dates until this recent one, and it was a big no. Oh, they're going to do it in March. Oh, they're going to do it in June. They're going to do it in September. And then finally, yes, they did do it in December. But that was the first thing that popped into my mind. It's kind of like, oh, really? I've been fooled once before by you guys.
Well, yeah, and Mike, I don't disagree with you, except now the underlying reasons why they would raise rates are a lot different than what they were a year ago. In the latest quarter, U.S. GDP grew at over 3%. Unemployment, and forget the structural unemployment right now, but unemployment is down around 4.7 or 4.6%. Mm-hmm. These are different facts right now. And then you've got President-elect Trump coming in with the promise to get rid of regulations, to lower taxes, to spend billions, tens, if not hundreds of billions on infrastructure and other programs. So I think the stage now is more set to have these rate increases that they're talking about than what it was a year ago.
Okay, big thing for us is, okay, that's great for the States. What about the Canadian, what's our impact? I mean, I looked at that Canadian dollar. It seemed to pay attention.
Well, it did, Mike. In the 24 hours or 30 hours after the rate increase, the Canadian dollar lost 1.5 cents and put it right back on the defensive. And I mean right back on the defensive, A, because of what's going to possibly happen next year, but B, we saw the U.S. dollar go higher against the Canadian, against the euro. Gold took about a $25 or $27 hit, and it's just changed the landscape, and it's going to continue to change it for Canada, and I think that's where we're more impacted, not what's happening specifically in the U.S., but then, as I said, changes Canada's landscape.
I want to come to something else in Canada, but first let me say what you've just described, Mike, the stronger U.S. dollar, the weaker Canadian dollar, that kind of a scenario, the gold going down. You've just literally described what the World Outlook Conference predicted for this year. And we've been predicting very consistently on Money Talks. And in this business, thank God you don't have to be good looking or I wouldn't be here. But you look at your models, you look at your approach, and you see if you're right. That's a big reason why people should attend this year's World Outlook Conference. But we're talking Canada, so let me go talking about interest rate and the impact. What about those household debt numbers we got this week?
Well, Mike, but just one more thing before we leave this story, and that is what the U.S. has done has affected bond yields, not just in the U.S., but basically around the globe. And when bond yields are affected by something that happens in the U.S., Canadian mortgage rates go up, and TD just matched Royal by raising their rates on their 4- and 5-year mortgages. So there is a lot of effect that takes place in the marketplace. Now, as far as household debt is concerned, Canadian average household debt rose to 167% of the average of household income, disposable income. So for all the disposable dollars you have, every dollar in your household, you have $1.67 in debt for the average household.
Well, the other side, though, of that coin, and there's a couple of things, is that our assets have risen faster than that debt number. I think we've got $5 in assets now for every $1 of debt. But I think that the issue still becomes what you just alluded to, Mike, with higher interest rates. Not in Canada, the Bank of Canada rates, but as you said, it's the bond market. And that's where I think it gets a bit worrisome, is that, hey, look, great, I can sell my house and the bank's going to be happy and they got paid off, but that doesn't make me happy. So it's really about how you cover that debt. Are you protected, if you have a disruption of your income? Because that's what you care about as an individual. I don't want to sell my house or be forced to sell my house. So I think that, the lending institutions may be covered, but again, what about individuals? And that scenario you're painting with the higher mortgage rates or higher interest rates should at least put a bit of an amber light going here.
Well, Mike, so many people are getting into housing with the minimum down payment and being able to scrape together, basically and literally scrape together their monthly mortgage payments along with whatever other costs come with owning a home. And just think, if we went back to the 5-year standard of interest rates on mortgages, that's 4.64%. Okay, not going there anywhere soon, but those who are buying and struggling just a bit or just making it have to be able to think of 3 years from now, 5 years from now, when their mortgages, that term runs out and they have to refinance, where are interest rates going to be? And that's what the Bank of Canada is worried about. That's what the government and the Department of Finance is worried about. That's what CMHC is worried about. And they are all focusing on this fact that we could have a financial disruption, not a likely possibility, but it could happen. The Bank of Canada is extremely concerned about it, and I think we've got to take a step back and look at borrowing for 0% to buy a car and locking in for 72 months. I mean, that tells you the state of what the cost of credit is, but I think we have to take a step back and say, boy, we better just be a little prudent here, especially if we are close to the line as far as affordability out of our income is concerned when we borrow.
Well, Ozzie Jurik's going to be with me later. He's got a new forecast by the BC Real Estate Association about what they think those mortgage rates are going to do, and I think it's going to surprise some people. Michael, you go out and have a terrific weekend.
You too, Mike. Have a Merry
And I won't,
Christmas.
have a Merry Christmas to the whole audience. Yes. Okay. I'll take a break. I got Neil McIver on with me. We'll talk about those rising interest rates. What does it mean for your portfolio? Neil's got some ideas. Stay with us. You're listening to Money Talks. It's time for the big fat idea. Very pleased to welcome back to the show Neil McIver from McIver Capital Management, Richardson GMP. Neil, just talking about that bump in rates in the States and the forecast of more to come. What's your big idea for us this week?
Well, good morning, Michael, on this very cold morning. But my big fat idea is really to tactically review portfolios with an eye to significantly decrease folks' exposure or to sell, quite simply, interest-sensitive positions such as mid to long-term bonds, high-yield bonds, traditional preferred shares, utility stocks, bond mutual funds, really, Michael, anything that will be negatively impacted by higher interest rates or inflation, or at least the expectation of inflation. And then on the reverse side, buying or adding positions such as real return bonds, floating rate preferred shares, and potentially even adding a few U.S. mid-sized growth stocks to the portfolio, priced in U.S. dollars as well.
So you're seeing this huge shift in interest rates, or the potential huge shift, but there is a shift in interest rates, and people better, make sure that their portfolio may have been structured for these lower rates for the last several years. I think it's a great suggestion. You better have a long look at that one again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Trump's victory really is a catalyst to a great degree. I mean, things were changing prior to that, but I think Trump's victory was certainly a catalyst. The sand is shifting beneath their feet. And after, years of artificially low interest rates, money printing, and anemic growth, we may be moving into an environment with higher interest rates, some inflation, a higher GDP growth. It's really, quite a dramatic shift. And, of course, you saw part of that on Wednesday. My concern primarily is complacency among investors, both individuals and professionals alike, because for years, decades really, it's been really easy to buy and hold interest-sensitive investments and do quite well. Falling interest rates provided capital gains over and above any income that folks were receiving on those bonds or preferred shares. But the world's changed, and keep in mind that Trump was elected on a platform of cutting personal and corporate taxes, deregulation, infrastructure spending, and it shouldn't really be a secret to anybody that such policies have a tendency to speed up the velocity of capital, increase economic growth, and eventually generate higher interest rates and inflation. So,
give me a couple of examples of how we would do this as investors.
Well, there's a number of different ways, and I think the most important thing is to understand that to take these suggestions in context. You still need to own, bonds to a certain degree, high-yield positions, U.S. Canadian equities. So it's really about a tactical shift from one asset class, to another, without completely throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But the first thing you'd want to take a look at is Government of Canada real return bonds. These are fully guaranteed by the Government of Canada. They pay an interest rate of anywhere between 1.25% to 4%. Plus, the principal value of the bond increases with the rate of inflation every year. So if your bond pays 2% and inflation's running at 2%, you're going to get a 4% rate of return. But if inflation pops a little bit up to, say, 6%, your bond is now going to pay 8% as a yield. So there's various issues of these bonds going out anywhere between 15 and 30 years. They're highly liquid. They can be bought and sold on any given day. There's also rate reset or floating rate shares, which are similar in nature, but they've got a higher income associated with them, and obviously it's tax preferred here in Canada. And some of them getting a yield of up to 6 to 7%. On the growth side of the equation, if President-elect Trump is successful in increasing America's GDP, the most likely sector of the U.S. economy that'll benefit will be U.S. mid-sized growth companies, and these are established, profitable companies, just not quite yet the size of Apple or Facebook. And a simple way to access this market would be through an ETF. There's a particular one that I like called the iShares Russell 2000 Growth Index. It's already up about 12% since Trump's victory. Its symbol is IWO. It trades on the Amex exchange, but that's a solid bet to jump into this party that I think is going to take place over the next little while.
And only a few seconds left, but I mean, this to me seems appropriate for everyone. I mean, they've got I love your review idea. As I say, have a look at some of these others. You're still going to own something fixed income maybe in your portfolio, but it doesn't mean you don't examine them, as you say, and prepare yourself this way. I mean, I guess it's like crystal ball for a second, Neil, but, are we looking, this is not a trend that's going to end this weekend, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely not. No, for 30 years, interest rates have been coming down. Obviously, that was exacerbated with the financial crisis in 2008, and artificially, rates have been pushed down. So, this is going to probably continue in excess of 5 years into the foreseeable future. I mean, growth.
I got to leave you at that, Neil. Sorry, time's up. Neil McIver Capital Management, Richardson DMP. I'll be back in a moment. Much more coming your way.